Thank you, thank you. The reason that I created this podcast is because I want to feel better. So many of the right-wing talk show hosts that I've listened to over the years make me feel worse, more anxious, more fearful, angrier. And I want to feel better, and I want the people who listen to my podcast to feel better after having listened to it than they did at the beginning.
People say people from Brooklyn curse a lot, but they don't mean to. Certain words are adjectives to them. Like when I was going to college, I was in a history class with a friend of mine who was from Brooklyn, and the professor was talking about when Argentina attacked the Falkland Islands. So, this guy's going, yo, professor, what Falkland Islands you talking about? So the professor's like, I don't think you understand. He's going, hey, no, you don't understand. I ask you a question. I got to know what Falkland Islands you're talking about. There's Falkland Islands all over the place. What am I supposed to put on a test for crying out loud? So the professor's like, look, there's only one Falkland Islands. Like, hey, moron. Hey, read my lips, all right? There's Falkland Islands all over the world. Look at the map. Look at it. See those little pieces of dirt floating around in the water? Do you know what they are? They're Falkland Islands. You got the Hawaiian Falkland Islands, the Bermuda Falkland Islands, the Caribbean Falkland Islands, and somewhere on there, you got Gilligan's Falkland Islands.
Good morning. It's Monday, Medal of Honor Monday, April the 15th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 Strategies of War, and the Medal of Honor. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now some Mafia action.
Well, you fast forward to 2019, and now Giuliani is Trump's main lawyer.
Right.
Did you deal with Trump at all?
I met Trump, probably won't even remember, but I met him with Roy Cohen. We met at, I forget the club. There was a private club that Roy used to go to. I met Donald, and we said hello. We exchanged niceties and so on and so forth. And way back when, myself and David Bogatin, who was one of my Russian associates, we bought, condos in Trump Towers, when it was being built, or way back at the time, early 80s. So, I had that kind of an encounter with him. But, let me get this out right away. Trump was not associated with the mob. Didn't have relationships. Trump was a developer in New York. And any developer in New York had to deal with mob guys or mob associates because they dealt with the unions, and every union was mobbed up. Every union, every local, every union. So in order to get things done, you had to deal with us in some way, shape, or form. Didn't mean that you were part of our life. We didn't go out to socialize and have dinner. We did with some. Jerry Gutterman was one of them, big developer that I, had a lot of relationships with. He eventually went to jail, but, I worked personally with him. But Donald wasn't one of those guys.
So the Teamsters were essentially run by the mob.
At that time, yes.
And Jimmy Hoffa was a close associate with the mob as well.
He was.
And that's how you guys kind of got in that whole situation. And the Teamsters were a huge union. It was all the truck drivers and everything, right?
That's correct.
And so you guys controlled the unions. You also controlled the docks?
That's correct.
Okay. So you guys really had your hands in a lot of things. If you guys wanted to stop New York City, you essentially could do it.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, look, you control the Teamsters. You control trucks moving all over the country, goods being shipped all over the country. You call a major Teamster strike, you cause a lot of damage. You also have, understand this, same thing with the docks. You call a strike on the docks, nothing gets moved in and out of the country. You can cripple the country in that way. Aside from that, just think of the amount of money that those unions had in their pension funds, and how valuable that could be to mob-related industry where many guys couldn't go to a bank and get money, but they can go to a Jimmy Hoffa and say, hey, we need X amount of dollars to build a hotel in Vegas. And Jimmy could approve it, and that's it. You got the money. So politicians realize that too. And that's why they tried to get close to us to get the benefit of what we can do as a result of our controlling the unions. So you control the unions in this country. You control a major part of our political landscape as well as a major part of business.
I mean, in 2019, is there any criminal element in the Teamsters that you know about, or is it completely legit now?
There are still locals that are in some way controlled by the mob, and there will always be that way. As far as, at the top level, I can't talk to, what might be going on at this point in time now. I'll tell you this, I never put it past my former associates to work their way back into this situation. I don't, because they're very, that's what we do. I don't know how the young guys are as capable as guys like us were, but, we had a way to get around people and do our bidding, or have them do our bidding for us. I'll tell you this, I saw The Irishman. I don't know if you've seen it, Scorsese's new film.
Not yet. I heard it was great.
Okay. It was good. It wasn't epic. It wasn't The Godfather. It wasn't Goodfellas. I don't think it was in that level. And I can tell you that the story was a complete lie. There's no truth to the story. Yeah, certain little things that happened were, but Sheehan did not kill Jimmy Hoffa. And that whole thing, he's been disproved, so often by law enforcement and everybody else. I'm not dissuading people from seeing the movie because it's a movie. It's Hollywood. It's entertainment. But it's not a truthful depiction of what happened.
And that was a little bit of Mafia action. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Patriotic Shorts.
How did this pilot receive 3 awards in just 4 days? On March 4th, 2002, Captain Scott Campbell flew his first combat mission over Takur Ghar, Afghanistan. A group of SEALs and Rangers were in distress after being hit during an infiltration, and Campbell was sent to provide air support. He engaged targets with his own weapons, directed attacks by other air assets, and delivered 6 bombs, 500 incendiary rounds, and an unspecified number of rockets during an 11-hour engagement, which resulted in 200 to 300 enemy kills. On March 6th, he coordinated air assets during the capture and extraction of an al-Qaeda leader, and the next day, he took over control of air assets during a firefight in progress, dropping 6 bombs and firing 550 rounds from his 30-millimeter cannon, for which he was recognized a 3rd time. His valor and leadership during this mission earned him 3 distinguished flying crosses in just 4 days. The highest scoring ace in the Vietnam War was an enemy pilot who was said to have racked up 13 kills and who was so dangerous that the commander of the U.S. 7th Air Force was obsessed with shooting him down. But who was this mysterious pilot? His name was Colonel Toome, and he was described by American intelligence as being an airborne outlaw in the image of a Wild West gunslinger. Known for his bold, head-on attacks and rogue tactics, he managed to shoot down more advanced F-4s with his slower and older MiG-17, and once even single-handedly wrecked a strategic bombing mission. That is until May 10th, 1972, when Toome was shot down by a Navy F-4 Phantom. Or at least, that's what American intelligence claimed. It turns out that there was no real Colonel Toome, nor any North Vietnamese pilot with 13 kills. Whether due to a misunderstanding or exaggeration, Colonel Toome grew into a larger-than-life myth. But that doesn't change the fact that North Vietnam ended up with a very impressive 16 fighter aces.
So I heard that we have a very similar saying, no atheists are in foxholes.
We've had kids say, I'm looking out for myself. If I get killed, it's my fault. That's the end of it. Some of us will say, I'm going to hope God will help me get through this battle. No atheists in foxholes, though. I've seen them yell and scream and help. Oh, God, help me. I've heard it time and time again. And they won't tell you, but they'll pray. You know a man might be praying, you leave him alone. But that started on Guadalcanal. No atheists in foxholes.
Really?
Everybody who exchanges semi-automatic fire within 5 feet is injured, right? I mean, that's every guy has a graze, scratches, cuts, glass, metal, everything blowing up in your face. Everyone's injured. Who's hurt? Who has to leave? And if you don't leave the battlefield, traditionally, you're okay to fight. And very few of our guys, the guys who left the battlefield were multiple gunshot wound guys. They were frag guys. But the guys who just had cuts, scrapes, and gouges, they never took a step backwards. So that was our thing.
The last time a battleship single-handedly sank another battleship in combat was when the USS Washington sank the IJN Kirishima, but the USS Washington did it without taking a single hit in return. How is that possible? It's because the commander of the USS Washington was Willis Cheng Lee, an Olympic sharpshooter. He pioneered using radar for targeting, and he taught his crew how to shoot each individual gun on the main battery of the USS Washington as if it were its own sniper rifle. And just so we're clear, that's 9 16-inch guns lobbing 1,700-pound projectiles 30 miles away, and now each of them are as accurate as a sniper rifle. So in 1942 at Guadalcanal, when Cheng Lee's task force was ambushed, he would send a single transmission to his men. Quote, "Stand aside, this is Cheng Lee, I'm coming through." As he rounded the outside of his task force, the USS Washington would take aim at the Japanese flagship, the IJN Kirishima. Hitting it over 40 times in the span of 5 minutes, 20 confirmed hits with the main battery 16-inch guns, and over 23 hits with the secondary 5-inch guns.
Welcome to Valor Stories. In each episode, we honor a hero awarded the highest gallantry medal, celebrating their courage and sacrifice. Join us as we bring their legacies alive. Ernest Richard Coomer was credited with killing an astonishing 250 enemy soldiers to protect retreating U.S. infantrymen during an hours-long battle at the beginning of the Korean War. It's no surprise that his efforts earned him the Medal of Honor. Coomer was born November 23, 1919 in Dwight, Nebraska, and grew up on a family farm. In 1940, as war was building in Europe, he decided to enlist in the army. Coomer served with the 9th Infantry Division during World War II. he fought his way across Germany and helped relieve the people of Bastogne, Belgium, after a long siege during the famed Battle of the Bulge in the winter of 1944-1945. After the war, he served as part of the occupation force in South Korea and Japan. But shortly after the Korean War began in the summer of 1950, Kuma was again sent to the front lines as an M26 Pershing tank commander of Company A, 70Z 2nd Tank Battalion, 2nd Infantry Division.
As luck would have it, there was a big barn right close by. Maybe the width of this building out there, maybe say 30 feet. We took off running to the building. He didn't shoot then, but he knew he probably had us when we got in the building. And sure enough, we got inside the building. There was nothing there. Well, Jim was trying to find a place to hide, and I stood back of the door. And when he come in the door, I took it. They had like a 2x4, and they put it across these cross arms to lock the door on the inside. And I hit him across the face and killed him. But before I could do that, the minute he come in the door, he saw Jim in the building, and he shot him dead. That's when I hit him across the face. And I took his ammunition and everything, and I took off running. Because I know people heard the shot.
We were passing over Jersey Islands. We got flak from there, but it didn't reach us. When we hit the coast, it looked like the 4th of July. Stuff was coming through the aircraft. You could hear it. The green light went on. We stood in the door. I jumped. Where I jumped, I had not the foggiest idea. I landed in a bunch of cows. Had I known then what I know now, I would have dropped dead, because I found out half hour later that I'd landed at the Carnation Milk Plant in Carentan. That was the headquarters of the Hermann Göring Corps of Armor, and I had jumped right in the middle of it.
This plane has an invisible weapon that can take out any enemy. This is the Boeing E-3 Sentry, known as the AWACS, and this aircraft flies with a huge radar on the top. The aircraft is designed to give countries the ability to fly close to a conflict and cover all nearby airspace. This plane is capable of controlling airspace up to 400 kilometers away, meaning that if just 3 AWACS fly over the United States, you could have complete air control over the country. But there's one big problem. Because of the radar's insane strength, the crew must switch off the radar when it gets close to other planes. This will stop electromagnetic waves that might damage other aircraft's equipment or even harm the pilot. So how do those crew on the E-3 Sentry stay safe? The plane is built from a special conducting material, which means the electromagnetic waves from the radar have no effect on the aircraft itself. This means the people who are inside are protected. What's crazy is that there are 31 E-3s in the U.S. inventory, so they could almost control the entire world.
He was first in and last out. He said he wasn't going to leave anybody behind. All the casualties were identified, and everybody made it out. We had 79 killed in action and 121 wounded in action after 3 days of intense fighting. Everybody made it out. He was there with us in our training, too. He was right there, running with us and right there in the heat of battle. You didn't see that much later in Vietnam when the commanders were usually up in the air. You didn't see many of them on the ground with you. And it was very unique when he spent the night with our company, with his command element, and that really puckered us up too when he was right there with us, sleeping right there with us. So he was a great leader, and he retired as a 3-star and did very well.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of motivation.
Other than death, all failure is psychological. Just think about that. This failure, this upset, this catastrophe. If you aren't dead, then it's just psychological. It's in your head. Now, this does not mean that you won't lose some battles, because you will. We all will. But it does mean that as long as you don't surrender, as long as you don't give up, as long as you don't quit, then you haven't failed.
I have failed far more times than I've succeeded. Far more. You will never succeed more than you fail. That's not how it works. You know why? Because failure is a wonderful teacher. It's the only way to learn. You have to fail. Failure is a part of the process to becoming successful.
People don't see that, and people will never understand that. To be success, all they think about, well, he batted 202, and he struck out a certain number of times. Yeah, okay. But the effort was there, and the learning curve and the passion was there that has transcended not just to me, but to other people who are afraid to do things because they're worried about the perception that may come from other places. To me, that's more gratifying than anything, So that's the things that my father and my mother instilled in me. Take a negative and turn it into a positive. Don't be afraid to fail.
The ratio of failure to success is very high. And you have to do a lot of things before something goes viral and bears fruit. But that doesn't mean that all those other attempts that didn't magically catch fire were failures. It just means that you have to do a lot of things before any one thing really catches on. And so if you think that you can be successful without failure, you don't know anything about how to be successful. So that's just a foolish criticism.
So when you fail, it's a part of the process. Keep going. You're supposed to fail. Shit, who you know that gets it right all the time? That's impossible. You have to fail. Matter of fact, when you fail, be glad about it. Every time you fail, you're one step closer. So every time you fail, say, whew, got that out the way. Go to the next one. Fail again, okay, I got 2 out the way. What's going to happen is if you just keep swinging, you're going to get a hit.
Your mistakes are not final. Your failure is not final. Rejoice not over me, O my enemies. For when I fall, I will rise again. When I sit in darkness, the light will come.
The reason why some people give up in life because they may have had an opportunity, but they failed. And they think that opportunity will never come back. But the same formula that got you your first opportunity will get you your second. But this time you'll execute. This time you'll be mentally ready. This time you'll remember how you failed. And every time that I step out and I get up in the morning and scream to the sun, rise, so I can go chase my dream. Every day I wake up, I'm thankful because I know that nobody could have saved my life but me.
Failure is part of life. I mean, the difference for me, though, is I look at failure as a stepping stone to success. It's a speed bump. I know I'm going to fail, but it's not failure if you learn something. And so, gosh, I've made so many mistakes. I've screwed so many things up, but every time I do, it just becomes a way for me to explain to someone else what it takes. It's like, here's what I've done. I think I have the ability to influence people because I talk about my failures. I talk about all the things that mess me up, but I show people that I didn't let it stop me, and you don't let it stop you.
People do not care about whether or not they succeed. They care about whether or not they fail. And so that's another thing, is that if you're marketing something and you can say this will stop you from being identified as a failure, then people might be happy about that. But if you say this will really help you succeed, it's like, no, I don't want to succeed. I just don't want to fail. I don't want to succeed. I just want to be invisible and be left alone.
The moment that you start something, paths will start to clear out. And you might not know what's going to happen or how it's going to happen, but I promise you, if you pick that thing that you love, I'm talking about you really love, I'm talking about that thing that you will do for free. If you pick that every day, if you choose that every day, consistently, it's inevitable for you not to be successful. And those kids got to understand, you got to stay true to yourself. You got to have the ability to think for yourself. And know that sometimes you're going to have to be a man before you become one. But you're ready for it.
You might have made a mistake, but you're not one. You might have failed, but you're not a failure. You might be down, but down is not your destiny. There is a resurrection coming to your dream, to your life, to your call, to your purpose.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the daily laws for April the 14th and April the 15th.
April 14th. View the world as a vast, interconnected palace. The world is dangerous and enemies are everywhere. Everyone has to protect themselves. A fortress seems the safest. But isolation exposes you to more dangers than it protects you from. It cuts you off from valuable information. It makes you conspicuous and an easy target. Since power is a human creation, it is inevitably increased by contact with other people. Instead of falling into the fortress mentality, view the world in the following manner. It is like a vast palace of Versailles, with every room communicating with another. You need to be permeable, able to float in and out of different circles and mix with different types. That kind of mobility and social contact will protect you from the plotters, who will be unable to keep secrets from you, and from your enemies, who will be unable to isolate you from your allies. Always on the move, you mix and mingle in the rooms of the palace, never sitting or settling in one place. No hunter can fix his aim on such a swift-moving creature. Daily law. Because humans are social creatures by nature, power depends on social interaction and circulation. To make yourself powerful, place yourself at the center of things. Make yourself more accessible. Seek out old allies and make new ones. Force yourself into more and more different circles. The 48 Laws of Power. Law 18. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. April 15th. Create a cult-like following. Having a large following opens up all sorts of possibilities for deception. Not only will your followers worship you, they will defend you from your enemies and will voluntarily take on the work of enticing others to join your fledgling cult. This kind of power will lift you to another realm. You will no longer have to struggle or use subterfuge to enforce your will. You are adored and can do no wrong. You might think it's a gargantuan task to create such a following, but in fact it is fairly simple. As humans, we have a desperate need to believe in something, anything. This makes us eminently gullible. We simply cannot endure long periods of doubt, or the emptiness that comes from a lack of something to believe in. Dangle in front of us some new cause, elixir, get-rich-quick scheme, or the latest technological trend or art movement, and we leap as one from the water to take the bait. Daily law. People have an overwhelming desire to believe in something. Become the focal point of such desire by offering them a cause, a new faith to follow. In the absence of organized religion and grand causes, your new belief system will bring you untold power. The 48 Laws of Power. Law 27. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following.
And that was the Daily Laws for April 14th and April 15th from the Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
Anyone who's ever gone through a 12-step process knows about this, right? I can't solve my own problem. I can't get myself out of this addiction. I have to give myself over to a higher power. Sin is an addiction. I can't solve it on my own. That's why the church has always stood against Pelagianism. That's the view that, well, I can just kind of pull myself up morally by my own bootstraps and make my life better. No, you can't. The proper stance of us sinners, therefore, is to beg. When you get out of this boring preoccupation with your own desires and your own autonomy, and you trust, you learn to trust in a power already at work in you that can do infinitely more than you can ask or imagine. That's faith. It'll heal you. Trust me.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, "The moral emotions of worship and reverence," Rand argues, "are real, but they have been misdirected. They don't belong to some alleged supernatural being who demands our unquestioning obedience. They belong to man at his best, and they belong in the life of any individual who seriously attempts to achieve his own happiness, to achieve the best within his own soul and life." Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we pick up where we left off with the 33 strategies of war.
By Julius Caesar. What we wish, we readily believe, and what we ourselves think, we imagine others think also. Keys to warfare. In the early history of warfare, military leaders were faced with the following predicament. The success of any war effort depended on the ability to know as much about the other side, its intentions, its strengths and weaknesses, as possible. But the enemy would never willingly disclose this information. In addition, the enemy often came from an alien culture, with its peculiar ways of thinking and behaving. A general could not really know what was going on in the mind of the opposing general. From the outside, the enemy represented something of an impenetrable mystery. And yet, lacking some understanding of the other side, a general would be operating in the dark. The only solution was to scrutinize the enemy for outward signs of what was going on within. A strategist might count the cooking fires in the enemy camp, for example, and the changes in that number over time. That would show the army's size and whether it was increasing as reserves arrived or decreasing as it was split, or perhaps as soldiers deserted. To see where the army was heading or whether it was readying for battle, he would look for signs of movement or changes in its formation. He would try to get agents and spies to report on its activities from within. A leader who picked up enough of these signs and deciphered them correctly could piece together a reasonably clear picture. The leader also knew that just as he was watching the other side was doing the same with him. In pondering this back and forth game of reading appearances, certain enlightened strategists in cultures around the world had a similar epiphany. Why not deliberately distort the signs the enemy was looking at? Why not mislead by playing with appearances? If the enemy is counting our cooking fires, just as we are counting theirs, why not light more fires, or fewer, to create a false impression of our strength? If they are following our army's every move, why not move it in deceptive patterns, or send part of it in a direction as a decoy? If the enemy has sent spies and agents into our ranks, why not feed them false information? An enemy that thinks it knows our size and intentions, and is unaware that it has been misled, will act on its false knowledge and commit all kinds of mistakes. It will move its men to fight an enemy that is not there. It will fight with shadows. Thinking in this way, these ancient strategists created the art of organized deception, an art that would eventually filter beyond warfare into politics and society at large. In essence, military deception is about subtly manipulating and distorting signs of our identity and purpose to control the enemy's vision of reality and get them to act on their misperceptions. It is the art of managing appearances, and it can create a decisive advantage for whichever side uses it better. In war, where the stakes are so high, there is no moral taint in using deception. It is simply an added weapon to create an advantage, much as some animals use camouflage and other tricks to help them survive. To refuse this weapon is a form of unilateral disarmament, giving the other side a clearer view of the field, an advantage that can translate into victory, and there is no morality or goodness in losing a war. We face a similar dynamic in our daily battles in life. We are social creatures, and our happiness, even our survival, depends on our ability to understand what other people are intending and thinking. But because we cannot get inside their heads, we are forced to read the signs in their outward behavior. We ponder their past actions as indications of what they might do in the future. We examine their words, their looks, the tone in their voice, certain actions that seem laden with significance. Everything a person does in the social realm is a sign of some sort. At the same time, we are aware that 1,000 pairs of eyes are in turn watching us, reading us, and trying to sense our intentions. It is a never-ending battle over appearance and perception. If other people can read what we are up to, predict what we are going to do, while we have no clue about them, they have a constant advantage over us that they cannot help but exploit. That is why, in the social realm, we learn from an early age to use deception. We tell others what they want to hear, concealing our real thoughts, hedging with the truth, misleading to make a better impression. Many of these deceptions are entirely unconscious. Since appearances are critical and deception is inevitable, what you want is to elevate your game, to make your deceptions more conscious and skillful. You need the power to cloak your maneuvers, to keep people off balance by controlling the perceptions they have of you and the signs you give out. In this sense, there is a lot you can learn from the military arts of deception, which are based on timeless laws of psychology and are infinitely applicable to the battles of daily life. To master this art, you must embrace its necessity and find creative pleasure in manipulating appearances, as if you were directing a film. The following are the 6 main forms of military deception, each with its own advantage. The false front. This is the oldest form of military deception. It originally involved making the enemy believe that one was weaker than in fact was the case. A leader would feign a retreat, say, baiting a trap for the enemy to rush into, luring it into an ambush. This was a favorite tactic of Sun Tzu's. The appearance of weakness often brings out people's aggressive side, making them drop strategy and prudence for an emotional and violent attack. When Napoleon found himself outnumbered and in a vulnerable strategic position before the Battle of Austerlitz, he deliberately showed signs of being panicked, indecisive, and scared. The enemy armies abandoned their strong position to attack him and rushed into a trap. It was his greatest victory. Controlling the front you present to the world is the most critical deceptive skill. People respond most directly to what they see, to what is most visible to their eyes. If you seem clever, if you seem deceptive, their guard will be up, and it will be impossible to mislead them. Instead, you need to present a front that does the opposite, disarms suspicions. The best front here is weakness, which will make the other side feel superior to you, so that they either ignore you, and being ignored is very valuable at times, or are baited into an aggressive action at the wrong moment. Once it is too late, once they are committed, they can find out the hard way that you were not so weak after all. In the battles of daily life, making people think they are better than you are, smarter, stronger, more competent, is often wise. It gives you breathing space to lay your plans, to manipulate. In a variation on this strategy, the front of virtue, honesty, and uprightness is often the perfect cover in a political world. These qualities may not seem weak, but serve the same function. They disarm people's suspicions. In that situation, though, it is important not to get caught doing something underhanded. Appearing as a hypocrite will set you far back in the deception game. In general, as strategists advocated in the days of ancient China, you should present a face to the world that promises the opposite of what you are actually planning. If you are getting ready to attack, seem unprepared for a fight, or too comfortable and relaxed to be plotting war. Appear calm and friendly. Doing this will help you gain control over your appearance and sharpen your ability to keep your opponents in the dark. The decoy attack. This is another ruse dating back to ancient times, and it remains perhaps the military's most common deceptive ploy. It began as a solution to a problem. If the enemy knew you were going to attack point A, they would put all their defenses there and make your job too difficult. But to deceive them on that score was not easy. Even if before battle you were able to disguise your intentions and fool them out of concentrating their forces at point A, the minute they actually saw your army headed there, they would rush to its defense. The only answer was to march your army toward point B, or better, to send part of your army in that direction while holding troops in reserve for your real objective. The enemy would now have to move some or all of its army to defend point B. Do the same with points C and D, and the enemy would have to disperse all over the map. The key to this tactic is that instead of relying on words or rumors or planted information, the army really moves. It makes a concrete action. The enemy forces cannot afford to guess whether a deception is in the works. If they guess wrong, the consequences are disastrous. They have to move to cover point B, no matter what. It is, in any case, almost impossible to doubt the reality of actual troop movements, with all the time and energy those involve. So the decoy attack keeps the enemy dispersed and ignorant of your intentions, the ultimate dream of any general. The decoy attack is also a critical strategy in daily life, where you must retain the power to hide your intentions. To keep people from defending the points you want to attack, you must follow the military model and make real gestures toward a goal that does not interest you. You must seem to be investing time and energy to attack that point, as opposed to simply trying to signal the intention with words. Actions carry such weight and seem so real that people will naturally assume that is your real goal. Their attention is distracted from your actual objective. Their defenses are dispersed and weakened.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War from Chapter 23, and by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. So if you're a Democrat, you should be voting Republican and become a Republican because the pressure's off. On the Democrat side of the ticket, the Democrats are under constant pressure to produce paradise and to produce it yesterday. The Democrat Party is about 50 years behind schedule. They should have created paradise about 50 years ago, but they failed to do so. So the pressure is on, the pressure is on, the pressure is on. Got to get the movement, got to get perfect. And from the time you get up in the morning until the time you go to bed at night, you're under the gun. Your fellow Democrats are looking at you, wondering why it is that you're going to Starbucks instead of doing something to create socialist paradise. But in the Republican Party, no such thing, because we're realistic. We know there's never been a paradise, there isn't now, and therefore there's not going to be any type of paradise other than the second coming of Jesus Christ. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Stuart Varney's My Take.
Visitors to New York City these days have to wade through dirty streets, wandering lunatics high on heaven knows what, migrant children hustling candy in the subways, and random acts of violence. This is not a city that's doing well, and the problems are largely self-inflicted. Well, today, another spectacle that makes this city look even worse. Donald Trump goes on trial. It's a show trial, cobbled together by Trump haters, and they really hate him, eager to put him in prison in the middle of a presidential election. They want to slime him, and they want to to tie him down in court so he can't campaign. In 2016, right before the presidential election, Trump had his fixer, lawyer Michael Cohen, pay a porn star $130,000 to keep quiet. It was hush money disguised as payment for legal services. Oh, says DA Alvin Bragg, that is falsifying business records. And he slaps Trump with 34 criminal charges. He had to bend and twist the law to move it from misdemeanor to criminal. He had to ignore the statute of limitations. He really wanted to get Donald Trump. He wanted to interfere with the election. This does not enhance this city's reputation. It is foreign dictatorships that put former presidents on trial on, forgive the expression, trumped-up charges. I blame the Democrats. They run this city, they run the state, and they've run it into the ground. For the next 2 or 3 weeks, lawyers will try to select a jury of fair-minded people. Good luck with that. Second hour of Varney just getting started.
So first thing is I will give Mr. Varney some credit for saying that he blames the Democrats. There's not enough people that are talking about that kind of thing, making the blame. Fix the blame fast. Always got to do that. Now, as far as the trials are concerned, this is all about government rights versus individual rights. We live in a country right now in which there's a battle going on, and it's about dueling rights. Whose rights are paramount? The rights of the state or the rights of the individual? Now, this is a false choice because in the Constitution, you look it up and the government has no rights, none. It's got some authority, it's got some responsibility, but all the rights belong to the people. This all started in 1900 with Herbert Crowley, who wrote a book called The Promise of American Life. And he's the one that got the idea started of the government having rights. But the point here is that we cannot survive as a society very long with dueling rights. So we have to make up our mind. We can either go back to a constitutional republic in which it's the people that have all the rights and the government has a limited amount of authority and responsibility, or we can go to a dictatorship in which the government has all the rights. Which is going to happen? Who knows? Which should happen? We should go back to the rights of the people, and the government does what we tell it to do. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Chapter 11 from World War II Heroes, Medal of Honor recipients, and their heroic stories of bravery.
Chapter 10. Private First Class Lloyd C. Hawks. PFC Lloyd C. Hawks is among the 52 medical personnel who served during varied U.S. military operations and have been awarded the Medal of Honor. Born on January 13, 1911, Hawks was originally a resident of Becker, Minnesota. When he was 8 years old, he and his family had to move to Michigan. He tried to join the U.S. Army in the year 1940, but was declined entry since he seemed too old and unconditioned to serve in a combat zone. However, in 1942, the United States had to further expand their forces to sustain its operations. This opened an opportunity for Hawks. He was summoned into the Army, being tasked to serve as part of the medical aid troops. Hawks proved himself to be a skillful medic and was awarded a Silver Star for his rendered service in 1943. As a private first class serving in the medical detachment of the 30th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, Hawks was deployed to Carano, Italy in 1944. Little did he know that this operation would earn him the highest recognition a member of the U.S. military can receive. While his unit was out on patrol, they encountered a firefight between American and German forces. There was a heated exchange of machine gun and mortar fire. Beyond U.S. Army lines, Hawks noticed 2 injured American soldiers lying helplessly on the ground. With them being only 30 yards away from where the German gunners were, it was next to impossible to come to their aid without being one of the combat's casualties as well. Medical personnel collapsed and hid in a small ditch near the infantrymen after being wounded while trying to perform first aid on them. The Germans easily identified him as such and made him a target. 2 riflemen made the same attempt but were immediately forced to retreat back to their fighting holes to take cover from the fire of the enemy machine guns. The soldiers were only able to move about 10 yards toward their fallen comrade before backing off the open field. Neglecting the failure of the previous men who attempted to perform the rescue, Hawks crawled around 50 yards under a rain of machine gun bullets and mortar fragments. He then approached his fellow aid man who was able to take cover. After taking care of his injuries, he proceeded to close the gap between him and the wounded soldiers. He needed to crawl another 50 yards. Even before he reached the first army man, Hawk's helmet was knocked off by a machine gun bullet. While recovering from being stunned by the impact, 13 bullets pierced the protective gear fallen just inches away from him. Brought back to his senses, he further advanced towards the wounded soldiers, prioritizing the one who had suffered more injuries. Even without anything to shield his head, he dragged the treated man toward a mortar crater 30 yards away. After securing the first soldier, he then crawled back to rescue the second wounded man. However, as he was rummaging through his medical kit for bandages, machine gun fire shattered his right hip. Not giving him any time to recover, a mortar blast suddenly shredded his left forearm as well. Ignoring the pain, he continued fixing up the second soldier with his undamaged right arm. Still helmetless and with his left arm dangling helplessly, Hawks was able to drag him back to the safety of the mortar crater where he had hid the first casualty. However, the small depression was not enough to cover 3 men. Hawks had to crawl another 75 yards amidst the continued exchange of fires to retreat back to his company. In recognition of such bravery, Hawks was awarded the Medal of Honor on January 15, 1945. He recovered from his injuries in an Army hospital, constantly receiving praise and encouragement from his peers. After healing up, Hawks opted to stay in the Army and was even able to serve during the Korean War. The Korean War lasted from June 25, 1950 until July 27, 1953, and was sparked by the Peninsula's division after World War II and the global tensions brought about by the Cold War. The United States fought on the side of the South, while China took the North as an ally. Previously a territory under Japanese control during World War II, Korea sheltered the Soviet Union forces in the North and U.S. forces in the South. In 1948, separate governments in the 2 regions were established and both claimed to be the legitimate representation of Korea's sovereignty. Moreover, both did not acknowledge the declared border of the other. The conflict led into a state of war when the Allied forces of North Korea, the Soviet Union, and China invaded South Korea on June 25, 1950. The United Nations Security Council immediately recognized the aforementioned offense as an act of invasion and called for ceasefire. The international organization adopted a resolution with the title Complaint of Aggression upon the Republic of Korea, forming an alliance of 21 countries who assisted the defense troops of South Korea. The United States Armed Forces provided approximately 88% of the UN-sanctioned military force. The Korean War resulted in a stalemate, with both the invasion of North Korea and the United Nations force repelled. The side of North Korea suffered 750,282 deaths and 789,000 wounded. Meanwhile, for the collaborative forces of the 21 UN member states, a total of 178,426 dead, 32,925 missing, and 566,434 wounded soldiers were recorded. Despite having his skills doubted when he first attempted to enlist himself in the Army, he was able to reach the rank of Sergeant First Class after serving for more than 11 years. At the age of 42, Hawks died from a heart attack on October 26, 1953. He was buried in Greenwood Cemetery, Park Rapids, Minnesota.
And that was, Chapter 10 from World War II Heroes, Medal of Honor recipients, and their heroic stories of bravery. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.